Welcome to This Explainer. Let's jump right in. Today, we are unpacking the incredibly rich symbolism, the intense shifting generational values, and the profound psychological depths of Pede Hollist's novel, So the Path Does Not Die. Now, this isn't just your standard story about growing up. No, it is a massive geographical and spiritual journey of a young girl trying to figure out exactly where she belongs in a rapidly, almost violently changing world. We're starting with a huge idea right out of the gate. This is a powerful quote from our protagonist's grandmother, Baramusu. She says, "Remember this, life is when people work together. Alone you are just an animal, so do not cut the rope." This totally sets up the central tension for the entire story. Keep that rope imagery in the back of your mind, okay? Because this text fundamentally asks us, how do we tie ourselves to our community and our heritage without being strangled by it? To guide us through this literary analysis, we're going to follow this roadmap. We'll hit the legend of Musuduku, shifting generational values, the initiation ordeal, school versus traditional paths, the bird-scaring rope, and finally, reconciling a fragmented identity. Section 1. The Legend of Musudugra. So, right at the heart of Finaba's whole existence is this intense struggle with a cautionary tale from her culture's past. She's practically haunted by the legend of Musudugu, which was this utopian village of women, and specifically, she's haunted by the story of Kumba Kargo. Kumba was a girl who wanted to learn new ways outside the village. She traveled, she gathered all this vast worldly knowledge, but when she returned, the myth says she had grown so physically massive that she literally trampled and destroyed her own village. For Finaba, Kumba Kargo is the ultimate terrifying cautionary model. It asks a really scary question. If you seek too much outside your own culture, will you just end up destroying your home when you finally return? And that internal struggle right there is what frames this text as a classic Bildungsroman. That's basically just a fancy literary term for a novel of formation, education, and psychological growth that traces someone's journey from youth to adulthood. See, we aren't just passively watching Finaba get older. We are actively mapping her internal psychological struggle as she tries to form her identity against some drastically shifting geographical and cultural settings. She literally has to learn how to grow up without becoming a destructive giant like Kumba Kargbo. Section 2. Shifting generational values. Now, this mythological tension doesn't just stay in the stories. It builds into a very real, very intense clash of worldviews right inside Finaba's own family. On one side, you have her grandmother, Baramusu. She is the fierce guardian of tradition. She constantly uses the baobab tree as a metaphor for their ancestral heritage, and she argues that knowledge is a shared spiritual necessity that protects the whole village. But on the totally opposing side, we have Finaba's mother, Nabu, and her father, Amadu. They are operating from a place of deep psychological trauma after losing their first daughter, Demusu. Because of that unimaginable grief, Nabu completely rejects the old ways. She views modern education, going to school, as the absolute only path to individual physical safety and salvation for Finaba. Section 3. The Initiation Ordeal. This brings us to the central narrative driver of the whole novel, and the book really asks us to look at this event through two completely opposing psychological lenses. The fafe, or the initiation ritual, is incredibly polarizing here. To Baramusu and the traditional community, it is a sacred, vital spiritual ordeal. It's where a girl symbolically dies and a woman is born. It's the ultimate stamp of belonging to the community. But to Finaba's father, Amadu, it represents nothing but terrifying physical danger. Driven by the raw grief of losing his first daughter after her initiation, he does the unthinkable. He literally invades the sacred space mid-ritual to rescue Finaba. It's a massive taboo, and it results in them having to flee the village entirely. And to complicate Finaba's psyche even further, we have to talk about the concept of the Denkileni. A revered healer actually diagnosed Finaba and her late sister as Denkileni. These are prophetic children sent by the ancestors to show the community a new path through the example of their own lives. Think about what that adds to our protagonist. Finaba isn't just a kid trying to figure out her own life. She is carrying the immense, crushing weight of her entire community's future right on her young shoulders. Section 4. School versus traditional paths. After escaping the village of Telaba, Finaba's physical locations brilliantly map out her internal growth chronologically. It's a wild journey. Her timeline begins at age 10 in the deep, spiritually rich forests of Telaba. Then, boom, as a teenager she's thrust into Freetown, living with the wealthy Heddle family as a foster child and trying to navigate brutal class struggles.
By her 20s, she moves to the diamond-rich region of Kono, where she has to fight off the exploitation of wealthy merchants. Fast forward to her 30s, she travels to the United States and faces the isolating, confusing reality of the diaspora before finally returning to Sierra Leone in her 40s to try and reconcile her past.
And the author, Pede Hollist, doesn't just tell us she moves. He absolutely immerses us in these shifting settings using vivid local color. You really feel it. We see the traditional lapa cloth and the sacred fafe. We can practically taste the ogiri and cassava leaves. You hear this vibrant, dynamic shift in the dialogue when characters start speaking Creole and Freetown, or you can imagine the sharp smell of omole, the locally distilled gin. This local color isn't just for show. It grounds Finaba's psychological journey in incredibly specific, tangible sensory details. Section 5. The bird-scaring rope. So through all these wildly different locations, different languages, and deeply personal traumas, there is one powerful metaphor tying Finaba's experiences together: the bird-scaring rope. Back in the village, big and little ropes are tied together all across the rice farm. When pulled, they work in harmony to scare away birds and protect the crop. It's a brilliant metaphor that begs the profound thematic question of the whole novel: how do you balance individual duty with communal survival? Basically, can you belong to the rope without losing your own individual thread? We really see this tested during her time in the United States, where we get this fascinating clash of psychoanalysis regarding the diaspora complex. Finaba desperately wants to mend her severed rope and return to her nest in Africa. But then you have her partner, Cammy, a man of Caribbean descent, who completely disagrees. He believes the whole concept of going back is a fiction. He just wants to be bigger than any single culture. And then there's their friend Amon, who longs for a highly specific, knowable African past to anchor her identity to. It is such an insightful look at how different displaced people mentally process their roots. Finally, Section 6. Reconciling a fragmented identity. Ultimately, Finaba knows she can't just live in this suspended, fragmented state forever. She has to find a way to merge these conflicting worlds into one cohesive self. So she returns to Sierra Leone, hoping to find her grandmother and apologize. But heartbreakingly, she finds her village burned to the ground by war. The literal past she was seeking is just gone. But here is the incredible part. Instead of fully cutting the rope or blindly trying to return to a tradition that doesn't exist anymore, she chooses to stretch the rope forward. She adopts a traumatized child soldier and uses her modern global experiences to help rebuild the war-torn remnants of her home. She synthesizes the old and the new perfectly. And that brings us full circle right at the very end of the novel. Finaba's young daughter, Dimusu Celeste, hears the tragic myth of Kumbakargro. You know, the girl who grew too big and destroyed her village, and she decides to completely change the ending. In her revised story, Kumba's destruction is actually an opportunity for men and women from outside to come in and build a brand new Masudagu together. It's beautiful. It ultimately proves that Finaba has successfully reconciled her identity, passing on a legacy of collaboration rather than destruction. Finaba's path didn't die, it evolved. By taking the best pieces of traditional communal duty and blending them with modern individual growth, she built something completely new. Which leaves us with this final, truly provocative thought for you. Are you ready to build your own Masudago by weaving together the best parts of all the paths you've traveled? How will you synthesize your own diverse experiences to build a brighter, shared future? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and I will catch you on the next one.